Today, I'm so happy to have the opportunity to interview our professor, Dr. Mejia.
So my name is Oscar Alfonso Mejia. I'll just start off a little bit telling you about my education. So I actually grew up here in Los Angeles in the northeast side of San Fernando Valley in the San Fernando, Pacoima, and Sylmar area. I actually got my BA from Cal State LA in liberal studies. And then afterwards, actually someone took an interest in me and it was actually my mentor, Dr. Robert Deshane, who was a rhetorician that was part of this department as well. He took an interest in me and actually asked me to apply for the MA program here in COM. And at that time, I remember I was doing a minor in communication because I was thinking about public relations. I was thinking about, what am I going to do with myself after college? Because how do I advance my own way of understanding how to make a career out of being getting educated? Because my background is my dad's an immigrant as well, very low socioeconomic background, and there isn't that much discussion of what's a career plan ahead of us, right, when we go to school. So him taking that interest in me kind of motivated me to think okay, maybe I could do a master's in communication so I can learn more. I can use the degree to kind of get better opportunities and have more doors open. So I got into that, and I also applied to be a teaching assistant or a teaching associate, right? And at the time, I was going to my liberal studies program because I wanted to be an elementary school teacher. And I wanted to be an elementary school teacher because I was a TA for LAUSD for 6-7 years at the time, right? The other part I haven't said is that I actually took me I'd say around 9 to 10 years to finish my BA, right? Because I took the long form because it was very hard to go to work, have a social life, kind of finish school, all those things at the same time, especially here in Los Angeles. We all know how expensive it is to live here and how hard it is to, maneuver this area. And so I took it. He took an interest in me, and when I applied, I also applied for the teaching associate or teaching assistant position. And I remember I got the call that I got into the program, and I'm also into the program to be a teaching assistant. And I started teaching college students, and college students really made a big difference in terms of how I understood myself. I found it very rewarding. I found it very exciting to go into the classroom. So I went from wanting to teach younger children, K through 5th, to now wanting to teach older working, more, I would identify as more closer to being my peers. And for me, from there, I kind of really motivated me to want to get my PhD. And so in my academic career, I actually applied for PhD school the first year. I didn't get in. So I had to stay here, and I had to adjunct for a while, which I enjoyed and I loved. But it was very hard. It was very hard to get into the next round. I mean, it wasn't really hard as much as I had to wait a whole year again, right? And I applied the second time, and then I got into a couple of schools, and I chose to go to the University of Utah. At the University of Utah, I concentrated on cultural studies and rhetorical criticism. So while there, I did different things. I got a grant for $10,000 to work with undocumented women living in sanctuary. Primarily, my work focuses on going into communities, especially Latinx communities or immigrant communities, and learning more about their narratives and how they talk about their communities, how they talk about their resilience, how they talk about who they are and the things that they're doing for themselves in a way that's not just kind of looking at the system itself and how the system hurts people as much as how do they themselves empower their space and how do they themselves look for resources with each other and together in networks, right? And so I worked with Jeanette Vizguera, Ingrid Encalada, and Vicky Chavez, who are in the Denver, Boulder area and also in Salt Lake City. And yeah, so as far as my accomplishments, right now I'm on the editorial board of the Western Journal of Communication. I am also I also review articles for critical studies in media communication, and and I work with as many students as I can. Usually, when I work with students, I've worked with them on them exploring something, a topic that they're interested in, focusing on issues that are not only like popular at the time, but also connect with them in some way. For instance, I had a student at the College of Worcester when I was actually a professor there in Ohio that actually did interviews with Appalachian women and to focus on their narratives and to focus on the way that they see themselves empowered as feminists within the Appalachian area. And that itself is kind of an interesting venture because I am not from the East Coast, I am not from the Appalachian area, and getting to know a little bit more about the stereotypes and the different ways that Appalachian women are kind of seen in the discourse was something that's really interesting to me. I've also worked with students in terms of them discussing and exploring issues within their own communities and the ways that they've had different relationships with different nonprofits or different jobs that they have themselves and how that connects to different social justice issues. I'm currently still trying to navigate Los Angeles and work in connection with a lot of more mutual aid groups and nonprofit groups. I've talked to different people from the mayor of the city of San Fernando, for instance, or I've talked I've tried to reach out to different organizations to kind of get more of an understanding of how I can help students have more practical hands-on experiences. But because I'm really new and I'm in this space, I'm really looking to my students to figure out what are their interests, what are the things that they would like to participate, also what are the things that they're currently participating in. Yeah, so it depends. If it's a lower level course, I tend to focus on a textbook orientation, but as far as any of the courses where I look at identity or I think about class, gender, sexuality, I tend to put together a syllabus of PDFs or they use PDFs from articles that I think are really important for us to discuss. One of the things for me is the fact that social justice is something that isn't just like a passing fad. It's something that's happening in different institutions in various ways. What do I mean by this? I mean that media, law firms, or any kind of space, they're always thinking about what is a way to advance community needs and the interests of communities. And in order to kind of encapsulate that or think about that, we have to discuss the history of marginalization. We have to understand how policy has affected different people over decades here in the United States. We have to think about conversations that are currently happening in terms of things that are happening to marginalized communities right now and how we ourselves can educate not only the community but ourselves on these topics. Sometimes people are a little bit hesitant to discuss or think about things that is not connected to them directly, and I think that comes from from the lack of getting opportunity to create something new out of it. For instance, I had students create zines from different social movements, right? And so more of a hands-on approach. And this isn't just about doing something that's arts and crafts. It's literally the history, what kind of discourse do they use? What kind of policies affected these people? What are the things that we're looking towards the future? Something that's really hands-on. I also like to think about helping students write prospectus, a proposal for a future project. Okay, what is something that you think you would really enjoy doing, and how would you approach that community, and what are some of the issues that you want to address, but also some of the issues that you might have as a researcher going into that space, right? I think that for students, it's really important for you not to only learn things learn in the academic sense, but also be able to teach those things. Communication and pedagogy kind of go hand in hand in the fact that good media always communicates really poignantly the specific interests people have, especially when it comes from within their community or about another community, right? And so I try to help students understand exactly what their own interests are and how different media is serving their interests or not serving their interests. And I think often when I ask students well, so what are your interests? What are the interests of your community? They're kind of well, they take a second, because I don't think that a lot of people really think too much about the political interests and the economic interests that they might have. So for me, it's if you can talk about it, then you're learning it. Then you're learning it. If you can teach it, then you're not just learning it, but you're transforming spaces. I think it's super important. I myself don't use social media too much. I have older accounts that I hardly go on. This is a professional choice, right, for myself. But I do find that whenever I talk to people that are politicians or people that are holding some sort of office or are nonprofit organizers or mutual aid organizers or people that are just activists in general, they're using usually Instagram or they're using Facebook. Those are the two that I've seen the most. And as far as like promoting different kind of programs and promoting different forms of educational materials, it happens on Instagram a lot. So maybe I think I'm gonna try to get back on Instagram and learn a little bit more about how that network works. Because for me, I've been seeing everyone that I talk to like, oh yeah, just check out our Instagram, just check out our Instagram. And I'm like, okay, like it went from Instagram being about photos to now it's really about access to material, which is interesting for me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mejia, for sharing your insights and experience with us today. It's been a great conversation.
To our viewer, if you or someone you know is interested in the field of communication, we invite you to consider joining the communication major at Cal State LA. This will provide you with the opportunity to learn more about Dr. Mejia.